Guys, we have a special one for you today. Reg, man, this dude, him and his partner are two of my favorite people in the world. They have 10 companies doing over 30 million plus in revenue, buying foundries. What is a foundry? Well, manufacturing, they're bringing it back to the States. It's a must listen. I love this episode much. Y'all enjoy the episode.
Your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
We got the guy. Welcome, everybody. We got Reg. Disclaimer, I don't control anything he says right out the gate. No.
That's true.
How you doing, my man?
That is very accurate. But by the way, my wife, Josh, and all the rest of my business, it happens to everybody. I mean, it's fine. They're like, it's fine. It'll be good.
So, I've listened to plenty of interviews, and we could talk about all your wonders in the manufacturing world. But I'm more, it's on your X profile. It says 7-time business owner. I don't know anything about you before, your manufacturing prowess. Let's talk about those days and who that guy was, and then we can get up to this kind of where we are today.
Yeah. Small town Wisconsin kid. Literally, mom's a hairdresser, dad's a teacher, had no idea what really the bigger, wider world was, other than like a lot of people got to the guidance counselor in high school and they said, hey, math and science, you kind of like that. That's cool. You should be an engineer. So I had no idea what that was. And next thing I know, I'm an engineer. And post that, went through a bunch of Fortune 500 companies, all generally manufacturing based, big engineering companies that made products, more or less. So Rockwell Automation, Honeywell, Schneider Electric, and GE. But, for me, it was always a kid who, grew up loving playing sports, thought at one time I was going to be Wayne Gretzky, then realized I don't have any talent when it comes to actually hockey or baseball or anything else I played. So probably needed to go get an actual degree that paid the bills. And then just kind of went from one thing to the next. So electrical engineering undergrad led to a supply chain program, because I talked to a lot of people at that point and they said, you'll probably never get another chance to do supply chain. And this is really where the rubber meets the road. So went through a bunch of different true manufacturing type environments. That was my first real entree to understanding how automation works and what it takes to build these electrical cabinets that might be 20, 30 feet long with, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment in it, installed all over the world. Finally realized, hey, that's how we get oil out of the ground, or that's how we generate electricity. That's how we punch products to make things that you see every day. Had no idea how any of that worked until I got to that place. So, and then partly the time when I was there, everybody that I knew that graduated and the folks that were growing up, there was a lot of people going into software or, maybe what we would call kind of firmware, but anywhere kind of a hardware versus software together. But I went the other way. So power electronics, understanding manufacturing, et cetera. I kind of grew up on that since the time, early on in my career, and most of my peers did not go do that. Some of them went into controls and automation, but mainly, there weren't people that were actually manufacturing products, partly because there was so much of that was going overseas and or moving into Mexico. So I tended to stay in that side of it. And then as we moved further and further through it, it really just got to the point where I got sick of corporate. And after, I don't know, I've counted this before and I always forget the number, but it was in excess of 20 jobs in the 17 years that I was in corporate America. And then finally just ran into a really bad boss. Had always really wanted to go do something because my buddies are plumbers and HVAC guys. Some of them own their own small business. Some of them drive beer trucks, but these are the guys that they love going. They do their normal golf leagues. They played dart ball. Most people wouldn't even know what that was, but hang out in the little small town bar and grills. That's where I'm from, and they always seem to be in better shape mentally and physically than I was when when I'd come home from corporate after putting 250,000 miles a year on airplanes, and I thought, this might be something that I need to figure out how to do better. And then it finally got to the point. My mom saw me one day, walked in. And I won't swear in your podcast, but my mom swears like a sailor, and she said, "You look like fill in the blank." And that was probably the time. Like, hey, thanks, Mom. Great, lovely. And she's like, "You look exhausted." So anyway, fast forward a few months and bought a business, and here we are, 7 of them later.
Guys, let me take a minute to tell you about my buddies over at Lead Hub, Ben and Aaron, the best humans I know. Not only are they amazing at marketing for trade companies, but Ben started his HVAC company in his garage, sold it for multi-million dollars. So when this guy talks, I listen. When we took over Dietz Mechanical, we had 22 reviews in 22 years. In 7 short months, we went from 22 reviews to 107. We went from a 4.2 to a 4.7. We tripled our Facebook presence and we tripled our calls. If you're an HVAC, plumbing, electric, landscaping company, and you're looking for a no BS approach to marketing, you're looking for people who have done it before, you got to go to leadhub.net. There was something out like a couple months ago that said the young audience, let's call them 20, early 20s, their dream job is to be like a content creator, like a TikTok person. And I learned something when I was really young. If everybody's going to the right, I want to go to the left. And I think there's an opportunity, and this is just my opinion, if you prescribe to Mike Rowe and all that stuff, I think there's an opportunity to go against the grain. And there's a gap in the market because everybody wants AI. They want the new stuff. And while I enjoy using that stuff and I'm open to learning and I do use it, there's going to be a big vacuum gap in the traditional manufacturing, HVAC, plumbing, electric. I think it's a no-brainer, even if the sweater vests are getting into HVAC and plumbing, we'll see how long they last, right? And is that kind of been your life philosophy as well, too?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't think the sweater vests are getting into HVAC and plumbing. They're just buying them. They're not actually turning a wrench. They're not doing anything with their Patagooch vests with their emblems on it. That's not how plumbing and HVAC work. I mean, my buddies Rich and John, they're some stylish guys. One shows their ankle off, the other.
Well, John doesn't wear socks, and we've got to talk about that.
Yeah. I may know a guy who has an account about that. I'm not completely positive, but anyway, no. So, yeah, my version of the world is those things are always going to be important. I'm sure we'll get into kind of how everything is set up with my wife and I and our trusts and everything else we're going to be doing long term. But the big thing for me is that those are really important jobs that we'll always need. But at the same time, you need to figure out how to incorporate the latest and greatest technologies to enable the back end of that. But at the same time, it's still a relationship. So this is why you and I have unfortunately had to reschedule a few times and move around, because anytime a new acquisition comes up, it's really simple for me in that I'm jumping on an airplane. I'll talk to people on the phone a little bit, but I'm still an in-person handshake, sit down, have a cocktail or golf or whatever else. Doesn't matter to me. But I believe it's still really about, two people sitting down across from each other. Doesn't matter how big a company is. We still talk about that people buy from people. In this case, so I think that's the same thing. I don't think anything changes about that. It's just, how do you bring the latest and greatest intelligently to these businesses that are really important? And kind of my fundamental belief about, we really need to have U.S.-based manufacturing and we really need to make that work. And so that's, Josh and I's life work will be to enable, and everything we touch, we're going to be able to go figure out how to do that.
And when you bought that first company, do you remember the day that you addressed the staff the first time?
Oh yeah.
What'd you say?
So it was pretty generally easy. I apologize that I'm wearing a polo right now because I just had to go sign some paperwork at the bank, and at the time I didn't realize that I could dress like I normally do and hoodies and t-shirts and J1s. Now I realize, I can do that all the time. I've actually signed deals all over the place in random attire. But so it was, I think my first thing was literally, I apologize. You'll never see me in a polo again inside of the facility. Don't prejudge me too much. But then it was really explaining who my wife and I were, why we did this, where we came from, what my general idea was, which first and foremost was I need to learn from you guys because I have no idea what happens inside of these four walls from manufacturing. And then I explained a little bit of all the other manufacturing I'd seen and, where I'd been and how we were going to do it and what I thought would be the commercial side of what we could go do to change it and what I thought potentially a long-term vision would be, which admittedly is nothing to do with what actually happened. And then it was just open it up for questions and talk to them. And, after, I bought it from a husband and wife who were in their 60s. His dad had started it, so it had been in the family since its inception in the 40s. And so that was a pretty big change, especially for some of the older folks that were in there that had been with them for a long time. There was a lot of consternation because people didn't know ahead of time. And so they were a little upset that they felt like they'd known him for so long and their broker had told them, hey, don't tell anybody you're selling, don't do this, there's problems with it. And so, my first afternoon after I talked with a few of the customers, were dealing with employees that were upset with the old owners, and I still needed to go figure out how to make that happen. So in my typical fashion, a lot of making fun of myself and talking about other things we'd done, and we laughed and we went and had a beer, and it was fine. Nobody quit. I was freaked out, but it wasn't as freaked out because it was still still during the honeymoon period. But it was, be yourself.
I'm in a small town, and the mentality here is, it's a long story. It's where Pennzoil, Standard Oil, like literally the first oil well in America is 20 minutes from my house. Like big old companies, right? Rockefeller, Carnegie created oil like literally 5 minutes from me, and
That's incredible.
I have not. Still, we're 15 months in. I have not introduced myself to most people because what I wanted to do was I wanted our service to speak for it, not who I am.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue, and then maybe like in another year. But I just ran into one of our biggest clients dropping my truck off to get the oil changed at the same place, and I've met him twice. It's one of our biggest. He knows who I am. And, we just talked about normal stuff. How are you doing? Yeah, you're doing a big project for us this summer and blah, blah, blah. And what I found is like my need for people to know that I own the company is for my ego. But what's important is my 35 employees. And as long as they're happy, then I don't need my ego stroked. And it's been hard. That's the old me talking, not the young me.
Yeah. I was very much about getting out there to know everybody as soon as possible. Just because it was fine that it wasn't a big change, but for me, I just took a completely opposite tact. We were not growing. We needed to improve. We needed to do things. And I went out there to tell them where my background was, what I plan to do for investments eventually. We were open to new business. We do whatever we need. Here's my cell phone number. Call me any time of the day or night. But, it was those types of things. And that was the initial start of how we started to regrow the company and put it on the path to what it is today.
So when you bought it and you're changing it and they weren't growing, and, was it 30 days in? Was it 6 months in? When did you feel like you said, okay, like I see something here that I can put my hands on and I can actually move the needle and maybe this is something that we could do for the long term?
Yeah, it was probably 18 months in before I really started to see serious traction. We have a very long sales cycle in our industry, and there's been a lot of problems because 80% of these places have gone out of business in the last 50 years. So once they find one, they're really, really hesitant to move, or they were, partly because I was brand new. They had no idea. I could have screwed it all up. So that took some time, but then really what it amounted to is we changed a few things, and they realized, when they would call me, email me, text, whatever, they'd hear back nearly instantly, within minutes. And that was shocking in the industry. And then if they had customer service problems, like I would literally go jump in the vehicle, drive there and solve it. And eventually enough of that happened where we started to see some traction. And then probably 12 or 15 months in, we finally had a customer, one of our biggest customers now. They were, I don't know, top 5, but nothing. So they're probably 5, 6, 7 times larger now than they were then. They finally got sick of their vendor and said, all right, we're going to give you a chance. We're going to give you a lot more work. We'll see how you bring it. We're going to bring it one thing at a time. And we did a great job on all that. That obviously wasn't me. That was me bothering them enough to like, hey, we have capacity. Hey, we've now proven the quality, customer service. And once they did that, then what happened was other people started moving around. And once they, a buyer at one place goes to a different place and says, hey, these guys over there, Ermac was the name of the first company, here's all the changes we've seen since they changed hands. And so we just gobbled up market share in the local area, and we doubled-ish the business in 24 months, but it was, 24 month plus, so run rate. And by then we were looking at our second business about 18 months in. We started thinking about it 24 months in, got active and bought it about 30 months in. So then real chaos started.
And where did your funding come for the first 2 businesses?
Wrote out a check, SBA deal for the first one, and then generated cash from the business to buy the second one with, some additional bank money on top of it. So we refinanced out about 18 months in, and we started to see that traction. We saw the profits go up. We were able to refinance the business out of SBA into a local bank, and that local bank, so it was a non-SBA deal, then that local bank was willing to give us some additional money for the equipment and move and whatnot. And so that cash that we had from them, plus the cash that we generated in the business, allowed us to buy the second one and then move them all together. And, so we had, I don't know, we probably had 50% more debt than we originally started with, but a company that was 3-ish times larger.
Mm-hmm. And when you say chaos, what do you mean by chaos?
We took 2 30,000 square foot facilities and put them into one, be the simple way to say it. So there's literally one spot in our entire facility. So the first one was about 30,000 square feet. And we bought the second one that was about 30,000 square feet. And I hired a guy that used to work for me. And I said, okay, you've seen this place. Let's go look at the new place. And I said, you need to take this new place and put it into that old place. And he was like, I don't mean to say anything dumb, but these are 2 30,000 square foot facilities that are operating and they don't look that empty to me. I was like, yeah, give yourself time. I promise we're going to figure out how to make it work. It'll do it. So we have a corner of our building that's maybe 10 by 15, 10 by 20, something like that in feet. That's the only thing that hasn't been touched since we bought it 7 years ago. Everything else is reorganized, moved, shifted, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm. And, people go through different phases where they say, like, we've made a ton of changes in 15 months, and a lot of people would say slow down. But my philosophy is that when you're breaking it, you might as well just keep breaking it because you don't want to keep breaking them for, 6 years in a row. Like, what is because y'all have grown rapidly. Like, what's your outlook on stuff like that?
So typically for people who have never done it, I say if you've been running a bunch of Excel models in the ivory tower and coddled in corporate or as a banker or whatever else, the simple answer is don't go start breaking stuff. For us, even number 2, we moved them together, but we still had a pretty good idea of what we were doing. And the people who we'd purchased it from, like the workers there, they understood what was going on and they agreed with all the things we were doing. And there's guys I just mentioned, Rich. Rich and I talk about this a lot. Rich goes in, but Rich Jordan, by the way, we love buying turnarounds. But that means you have to get in there and you have to fix it really fast. Mm-hmm. Would advise strongly against that for everybody that's brand new to an industry. And we actually do that same thing with our employees. We bring a new plant manager, executive, whatever. If it's not a turnaround situation, which we just threw a guy to the fire Monday, recording this on a Thursday, so he's having fun right now. But beyond that, I think that it's at least 60 to 90 days because, you'll do things like, well, why do we need that? Or why can't we change that? The problem is, too, 1, that might be critical for some reason that you don't understand and you don't know. Or 2, there might be a bunch of other things that is going to have downstream impacts on. Or 3, and sometimes most importantly, you may realize you're taking on a project that's going to move the needle 1% when there's a bunch of other things that you're missing, because that'll move the needle 30, 40, 50%. So
Mm-hmm.
the better most people, once they understand the business, the reasoning, and then get a big picture, you tend to be much more effective beyond the fact that you now know better, but also you hopefully have built relationships, you've built up, some of your credibility, and you have a little bit of chips you can push into the middle to go help change that with everybody.
And I would say what you just explained was probably the biggest lesson I learned. I have a tendency to be a rabbit and chase things, and I don't do that anymore because I learned the hard way. Like we could serve a lot because there's a lot of need in the area, and we started doing some
Yeah.
construction because my guys know construction, blah blah blah, whatever, different business and HVAC plumbing, and I put up signs in everybody's office that said, if Austin brings up construction one more time, you can take his baseball bat and hit him in the you know what. And everybody still has it in their office because it's the truth. I mean, it was the
Yeah.
biggest headache because it's a different clientele and what they expect into a furnace or a plumbing, So
Yeah. And that's where everybody has to learn it. We tell people the stove is hot, they still touch it. I would have done the same. It's fine. I mean, as long as you don't make critical mistakes that you can't reverse,
Mm-hmm.
and or that are going to end your company, everybody's got to learn one way or the other. But now it's a totally different animal. So Josh and I, with our recent acquisition, we've learned a lot over the last 12 months, and we're doing our largest CapEx project in there. But we've refined our playbook from here on out. Now Josh, after 2.5 years, have seen a couple of these acquisitions. He's been working in the facility. So he's been in our facility for like 4 months away from home in South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in Austin, Texas. So now he's really comfortable to go do it. And so the next time we do an acquisition, it's assuming it's going to be a turnaround again. Those are my favorite because we're going to rip everything out and put our own systems in either way. It's going to be, instead of having 3 months, 6 month wait, figured out timeline, it's going to be 3 days, 2 weeks, 4 weeks type thing. And so we'll rip it all out. We'll put all of our systems in within a month. The people that need to be there will be there. The people that need to replace will be replaced, et cetera. So it's just we just need to move much faster because now we have the playbooks and the knowledge and the expertise to go do it.
And what does the current portfolio sit at today as we record this?
Yeah, so there's 7 now. There was 4 active now. There were 3 before earlier this week. And so it's an interesting situation for us because that's just in the foundries. We've got a few other things that we haven't made public yet that we're actually already working on in kind of the beta stage for folks that we'll be telling them about soon enough. But Josh and I have hinted at it enough. But the thing is so we'll have another 2 or 3 in the next year. So we should have 10 facilities or 10 businesses we bought. We'll probably be in 5, maybe 6 facilities, depending on geographic locations of where we are. But it's really, the portfolio is mainly non-ferrous foundries. For anyone who doesn't know non-ferrous, it just means without iron. So aluminum, brass, bronze, zinc, etc. So that's what we focus on as a company. That's what we're rolling up. We'll probably, like I mentioned, about 80% of these have gone out of business. So when we started pre-COVID, there was probably a little over 700. I've talked to over 600 of those. There's a bunch of those that have gone out of business. There's down to a list of roughly 35 that I'm willing to transact on that I talk to on a regular basis. And so, I don't control when owners decide eventually to sell, but we're finding something that's really interesting right now in that we're getting people that are interested in talking to us that are captive, which meaning they're serving an individual company. So they've got a vertical product line and they're saying, hey, we want you to come and run. Like they can no longer run it as a corporation, whatever it might be. They don't want to have that production. They don't want to have that headache. So that's opened up an entirely different and new animal of the products and systems we're looking at. So it's not going to be horribly different, but we're accelerating probably some of the vertical plays in some of these captive foundries that we didn't intend on taking on for a while.
And I've talked to Josh enough to know where he stands and how he views life. But like when you started this, right, you just bought one company, but now you got 10 and more are coming. Kind of what's your thesis? I don't care about like business agnostic. Like what's your thesis in what you're building, right?
Yep.
There's a mindset around foundry, but like what you and your wife, like what was the intention behind what you created and what you care about?
Generally speaking, get me out of corporate, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term. So my wife and I agreed she was way better at playing the corporate game, and she's proven that as she's now the CEO of a private equity owned firm. But for me, it was, we kind of broke it down like we wanted to do something. She knew that I always wanted to do something on my own. Always a problem with what I'd been looking at and what I'd been working on in corporate, especially the last 4, 5, 6 years that I was there. It was great learning, but it was just getting worse and worse every day. The Sunday scaries, the miserable air travel, constantly working. But for us, it was somewhat of a lifestyle play, but it was way more of a, hey, if we're going to do this, let's take the shot now. And so we made the decision that we're going to live on her cash. So she generates the current day-to-day cash flow that we live off of, and everything that I make goes to recompound. So the idea was she'll get the short term, maybe a little bit of medium term, and I'll get most of the medium term into long
Mm-hmm.
term. So she generates the cash, and I generate the equity and the assets long term. But it was always about doing something like that was bigger than just the money. We could have stayed in corporate, both of us could. I would have made it through. I'd have been miserable, but we both had really good jobs. We both would have had similar jobs to what she is now. Would have never been able to spend the money, but not really do anything of value with it. So there's always, I think, she came from a small farming community. Her parents, literally, her parents and family, uncles, et cetera, all owned farms together. Obviously, I came from a similar type community. So it was always, we thought about getting back into that some way, shape, or form. And so that, or at least our idea for that was, let's go do something. Not obviously to the scale we have it now. We had no intention or plan, but it was at a minimum, hey, we go work for another 10 whatever years. This thing can turn into not passive income. I still didn't believe about it then, but we'd have the flexibility then that we'd have made enough money on that side, and then we could probably relax a little bit and not work 60, 70, 80-hour weeks like we were doing.
Yeah, this is a new thing I came up with, but something that I've been focusing on lately while I'm redesigning my next 10 years for me is I think there's three buckets of money. There's a short-term money on how you live. There's a mid money on pops of cash,
Yep.
commissions or owner distribution, and there's equity. And the
Yep.
goal is
Exactly.
basically to build up the equity big enough where it encapsulates the first two, and
Yep.
then you're done. It's not. I think that the bigger issue that I deal with is that people make everything very complicated. It's
Yeah.
not, and,
Yeah.
and and we make it complicated in our minds, but also I think we take on too much information that then in
Yeah.
turn makes it complicated.
Yeah. I believe in keeping everything really, really simple, if at all possible. There's two parts of. I'll get back to your comment in a second, but I'm going to stay on this thread for a minute. For those medium to long term, that's the thing now where Josh and I refuse to sell our time for money. So that's
Yeah.
part of the game. If you want to, that doesn't mean that we won't sell our company's time for money. Obviously, that's what we're there for. But turning all of our back end systems, I mean, we didn't come up with this, but everything that we have that's a cost center today will be at worst break even, but more likely profit centers. They're already getting really close. We'll be there though relatively quickly. That's always a big move for us, especially in working capital intensive businesses. That's really important to do. And then on the other side, if you're actually going to get access to Josh and I, there isn't, I'm sure there is a number that would be, but there's not a rational number
Mm-hmm.
that you could pay Josh and I by the hour to do anything at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we're coming in, we're getting equity because if we're going to spend something, we believe that we're going to have a lot more upside in anything that we touch. So that's been kind of our mentality and the things that we're doing. And now, but partly that's because when we want to spend things, it's always somewhat about money. I don't mean to say that because a lot of people say that and don't mean it, but it's worth a lot more than just money, or it's about a lot more than just money. So there's a lot of other things that we want to go build. And so if we're going to do that, it's going to need to be something that we're passionate about and we want to do something in. And then, we're going to get the upside when we grow it and build it and help everybody else win as well.
I'm obsessed with two things right now because something happened to me last fall that was crazy. That I made an introduction and I made more money in that introduction than I made an entire year at my job. And I go, okay, how do I do more of this?
Uh,
That's number one.
yep,
And then the second thing is every time in my life I've left a good thing to pursue a great thing, my life has become
yep,
better. And
yep,
so I'm not going to be enamored with the six-figure coaching, whatever. How can I
yeah,
coach or consult for equity? Or
yep,
how can I do jobs that I truly love that create a higher output? Josh has taught me a lot about this. Where's my highest use of my time with my output? That's what I'm obsessed with the rest of my life. I refuse
yep,
to be enamored by the short-term cash.
yeah. But Josh and I talk about this all the time. And that if you think through that, it's important for you as an individual owner or any individual owner, but that mentality has to be pushed through your entire organization. And
Mm.
that's why you've seen us talk about this online, but also all of my teams know this. Every single task we think through, they've got to think, number one, can I eliminate this task? If I can't eliminate it, number two, can I automate it? Okay, if it's either I can't automate it or it's not worth automating, can I delegate it? And ultimately, that's delegating to the very lowest portion of the organization. You know, new people, like what I think is absolutely miserable today, would delight a 26-year-old or
Right.
somebody who's never seen it, right? So that mentality has to constantly push through. And then if you can't eliminate it, can't automate it, can't delegate it, then you got to figure out a way to make it fun for you, whatever that is. If you
Mm.
absolutely hate doing something, then figure out how to give yourself a reward for every time you do it, or do something. Not going to get into some of this mental gymnastics that I put myself through to do it, but that's got to be and everything. And if you think about that, right, that literally is what you just said, because this is when people don't like pushing knowledge off; they want to keep it for themselves. So the second
Mm.
part of that we force in our organization is that before you can get promoted, you effectively need to have two people that can do your jobs. So there's someone that could fill in immediately the next 0 to 6 months. There's a second person that we can train over the next kind of 18 to 24 months to make sure we can do it. So there's always that constant bench of talent. And that, one forces us to get rid of that herd mentality of, I'm going to have the tribal knowledge and I'm important because I have the tribal knowledge. And instead, it pushes the other way of saying, hey, we're getting everybody to their highest and best abilities and the highest and best impacts to the company by forcing this kind of on them. And then once they realize, like, oh, hey, I gave away all my tribal knowledge and then I was freed up to go do something else, I got a promotion, and other people see that, then that becomes really a very quick self-fulfilling prophecy of what we're trying to do. And generally speaking, you also see Josh and I talk about we try not to go against human nature. Anytime that we can utilize human nature to our advantage, we'll 100% do that through incentives or whatever else it might be.
The last 5 minutes was gold. So I got a question for you because I would love to get your take on it. So
Yeah.
I've been on my own since I was 17. I've worked 3 jobs basically for 20 years. Never took a day off.
Mm-hmm.
Music
Jeez.
business, sold wine. Like I dropped out of college 3 times. I said if I wasn't gonna go to college, I was gonna work. Right. So it
Yep.
became part of who I am. Well, now as an owner and certain things I do, people pay me more for my negotiating skills, my relationship skills, and
Yep.
I handed over CEO role like a month ago, and I'm in this like identity shift where
Yeah.
like if I'm not the healthiest version of myself and my mind's not clear, I can't make that important decision. Like I had a conversation yesterday that saved us a bunch of money and allowed us some freedom and cash flow. Like that's important.
Yep.
Nobody else can do that in the business.
Yep.
But I don't have as many meetings on my schedule. And sometimes I feel like I'm not doing anything when I know that's not the case. But like I
Yep.
know y'all don't have meetings on your schedule. Like was there a time when you had to switch out of like that worker mentality to more of an owner?
Yeah.
This is where I'm at right now. This kind of like shift.
So just to your reference point, Josh has far more meetings than I do, although he's getting more and more out of that as well. Again, pushing this down in the organization. But yeah, I have one meeting a month. That's it. And we just started that like 2 months ago. So it's the monthly review with all of our key people in the organization about what the prior month is, what they're looking at. Partly that's an accountability discussion because we really push down the idea that they're small business owners and we pay them similar to their upside of small business owners. So that's obviously really important. But then the other side of that is for them to learn from us and just to get to see, hey, here's how I'd think about it. Here's what monthly reviews, whatever, of just thinking about this, thinking about that, and then just pushing that down. But specifically to your question, I'll give you two interesting parts of this. One, the thing has to be that you realize that the decisions you make, the negotiations you have, whatever it might be, you're going to make in 2 or 3 or 4 decisions a year, or maybe eventually. That's where I'm at right now. Maybe it's a month today, as all the rest of the combined decisions in your organization. So you think there's 100,000 decisions that need to be made every month. That will probably be about equal to the 3 or 4 decisions you have to make every month. So
you just blew my fucking mind.
Yeah,
you just blew my mind because that's
yeah. So here's a way you can help to kind of make yourself be good about this in your head. Because if you get caught up, and I did this, I speak from experience, I got caught up in the day-to-day on one of our acquisitions, and I got drugged back in from one of an old employees about this. I missed some stuff, and I easily cost us $1 million. We might not even have done the deal had I had my head on straight and not distracted and whatever else it is. So that's what you got to be. And the same thing, like for me, if Josh or our CTO or somebody else has a problem, and if I'm bogged down in the details and I can't be that sounding board that can see the forest from the trees and the big picture and understanding where we're going over 5 years, now I'm doing a horrible disservice to my company. So that's just kind of from where you need to get to as an individual owner. But at the same time, you got to remember the other side of this, in that your company is far better when you are less important in, similar or kind of really simple terms. But at the same time, you now are responsible for 35 people. Those 35 people have whatever, hundreds of mouths you're feeding. In my case, we've done this. We figured this out. We have tens of thousands of mouths we're feeding by the time you think like all the way down for us. So you can't be someone who's so key that you're the key person in all these things. You're the key worker. You're the key whatever, because your company isn't robust. And now you're actually putting a lot of people at risk as well. So that's mentally kind of the thought process that I give everybody as first time, owners and going through it. But I'll tell you the absolute worst time you'll have. And I've been through this not that long ago. We're working through some really serious things that Josh had to solve. It was every single thing in my fiber of my being that I wanted to jump in because I had some pretty good ideas on how to solve it. But at the same time, if I would have done that, all the years of work that we've done to make sure that the chain of command makes sense, that everybody understands it, that we are letting people make their own mistakes and solve it, all that would have been thrown out if I would have done that one thing. So that's the really hard part when you realize you have a personal guarantee, your entire life savings at risk in a PG, to sit back and trust. Like, it's fun to talk about it now in the good times, and you're like, oh, you feel bad. Just wait.
No. I already went through it. We're coming out of the woods. You understand, I'm a pretty chillax guy. I had 5 panic attacks from Thanksgiving to January 31st.
So I understand it. There you go.
So literally, like, again, I found faith, bro. Like it sent me to the fucking Lord. I'm not, dude. I'm not, dude. We could talk about it off camera. I'm not joking.
First of all, you're not even 18 months in. I've told everybody and their brother, your first 18 months, you're gonna have your fetal position.
Dude,
don't look at me like I didn't warn. I've warned everybody.
You did. You warned me. Yeah.
There you go. And by the way, but it doesn't go away. I'm 7 years in. I mean, I didn't have full-on panic attacks or any of the fetal position moments anymore, but I definitely had some real tossing and turning, close to sleepless nights as some of these things went through. But yes, I mean, you're doing the right thing for your business. And even like the biggest thing is that your employees, like, you feel really bad, right? Like, oh, I want to be the ones that get my hands dirty and go and do this. And there's a lot of people that'll still preach that. I disagree fundamentally that just doesn't. It just doesn't work that way. It can't work that way if you want to really go continue to add and grow and give people autonomy and fix all that. And again, some of these people that talk about it, I was like, okay, well, I've run a lot more businesses and companies than you have, and I'm great that you appreciate and you think you're doing the right thing. But
Mhm.
even some of the people that have done it, that they're 50s and 60s are still micromanagers. I'm like, okay, great. So tell me you don't know how to do your job without telling me you don't know how to do your job. Okay, whatever, fine.
Dude,
Just gonna be.
what I thought about the other day, and I wrote about it, was like you have to look at the lens of every division in your company, that they have a different viewpoint of what they see as important to them. And
Yep.
you as the owner in the vision, whatever you are, you have to be looking around the corner, and as much as you have to be back here, you also have to be 2 years out, like where are we going to be here.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing right now. We're opening a second location in like tomorrow, and so it's like that's, and they don't, and none of the guys know where I am, and I'm like, they're like, they call me part-timer now, and I'm like, yeah,
Hey.
little do you know, we're gonna 20x the business in like 3 months. And I love it though, because they don't need me, right? And I
Yeah.
have the joys, just like you with Josh. I had the joys of having just a next level CEO, spent 20 years in the business. And I was in Houston for business, and we had a thing come up with an employee that I had a conversation with,
Yep.
and he wanted to handle it. And I said, well, hold on, because I was walking into a meeting. He said, if you actually trusted me, you would just let me handle it. And I was
Hmm.
like, okay, you're right, I gotta go. And
Have fun.
yeah, I was like, wait, you're 100% right. I have to let you do the thing. Right. And
Yep.
so, guys, what I want to say, and Josh is coming on next week again. I've had a conversation with Reg and a conversation with Josh in October at Main Street. Those two conversations have changed what he just said about decisions, and what Josh asked me about why I'm doing everything. That's all it takes. Two people that know where they're going. The power of a conversation and a thought changed the entire way I'll look at something. So, really, like, listen to that again. But here's my favorite part, and I'm so scared to let the dog off the leash, but here we go. What is the worst take on X or Twitter right now that you can't stand?
Worst take. Oh man. You could ask me this and give me a little time in advance to think
I
about it
know. I'm
because
sorry.
I've got no, I've got a
You got.
lot.
I know
As
you
you know,
do.
I'm normally very quiet. I don't really like to pick fights or talk with anybody or like say when I have a different opinion. Um, I mean, it's just the easy one is just all these folks that think they're going to get into the trades or the small business or what they just we've created, and I got in an argument the other day. It wasn't even an argument. I can't even claim what it was with somebody, but we've made absolutely terrible managers and leaders because of ZERP and the general bull market. People have never played in this thing we're about to stare down.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's still that general, but there are people, and I'll say this all the time. I'm not saying that people can't run small business, sure, but there's just people that shouldn't run small business no matter what. And Josh has talked about this at length, but it's miserable. There's a lot of times, like as bad as it was in corporate at times, from a anxiety whatever aspect,
Mm-hmm.
nothing like what it was in small business. Thinking that I burned up 15 years of my wife and I's hard work, labor, savings, etc. So that's part of it. But if we want to get on individual takes, there's I don't mind people if they want to coach. That's fine,
Oh
but
God. Here we go.
you you better have done something. Is all I'm saying. So
Dude, so my favorite guy to study is Rob Dyrdek, that nobody talks about. Like, nobody
oh,
understands
dude,
this guy's
Rob is
done
amazing.
$450 million worth of exits. Dude's a savage,
Dude,
right? He's a
he's
savage.
wild.
Nobody studies him. He's writing 3 books in software right now, and they're coming out. But I listened to an old podcast
Yep.
last week, changed my life. He said this is what happened to him. He said he had the idea for his, whatever you call it, venture studio. He went
Yep.
out and did press for 30 days. He goes, what the fuck am I talking about? He goes, I haven't done anything. And
Yeah.
he literally said, I'm done doing press. He goes, I'm going to go sell a bunch of companies, then I'll talk about it. He sold 8 companies, and he goes, now
Yep.
I'm going to talk about it. And I was like,
Yep.
perfect. That's
Yep.
the game. Like,
Yep.
right there. Like these
yeah. I mean,
21-year-old life coaches. I'm like, bro, you're talking to a former meth and alcoholic who's been through
yeah,
divorce. Like,
yeah, like
I've lived
calm
a
down.
life, baby. Lost
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars. Please move. Like, let's
Uh,
talk about real life. Yeah.
I don't. I think it was a Twitter handle. I think his Twitter handle is like co-founder Nick, if I'm not mistaken. He said this on tax day, and he was talking about. He's
Oh,
like, yeah, you're
dude, I told him
22
that
or
was the
whatever,
greatest tweet of all time.
dude.
Yes.
He's like, I'm gonna pay more in tax today than you guys are in your top line like cleaning business or whatever bullshit or
Yes.
coaching. I can't remember exactly what it was. I was like, dude,
Your power washing
if
business,
you
top line
only
revenue.
knew how much money I just paid in taxes the last day. Oh my God. Like that's the first like well into 7-figure tax bill. And people are like, oh man, you need to have write-offs. I was like, I have write-offs.
Dude.
It's still a problem. Like, yeah,
Dude,
I can only write off so much. My team will literally, I can't buy any more stuff. My team's already at their wits' end. There's no more bandwidth. What am I supposed to buy? Like, anyway, so.
Dude, my business partner in our new business that we haven't told anybody about, that people will find out soon enough after we slam a couple more deals through, is the first year this is personal taxes. It's the first year he didn't buy something to offset it. Last year he bought a plane and an RV before that and all this. It's on like 150 transactions in the HVAC space. I was like, oh man, I had to pay taxes. And he called me. I was like, how you doing today? We were talking about a deal. And he's like, well, I just paid the government $300,000. So, and I was like, all right, I'll shut up. I was like, but I also thought to myself, yeah, you paid him that much because you made some money on the other side. So, it's a different mentality shift for sure. But yeah, I mean, my frustration with a lot of things is that nobody talks about, we have removed nuance from business. Okay.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I know what I'm doing with my vendors at all times. And I told them from the day one, because they all came to me and they said, well, we've had a relationship with this owner for 20 years. And I said, that's great.
Right.
We'll see if that relationship continues. And they go, what do you mean? And I go, hey, look, dude, I'm all for fair game, but you're going to continue being great. And it's not just hey, we're going to order from you because that's where we've done it. And these are the things that nobody talks about, because this is what it takes. Because if you want to do business with us, then you got to join us on our level. And it's as simple as that. If people want to do business with you and Josh, and the vendors want to show up, they got to continue to show up. And I think a lot of places in the SMB world is set it and forget it, and it doesn't work that way. It does not work that way at all.
No.
It's an ever revolving door.
Yeah. Yep. And got to constantly get better. If you're, as they say, if you're staying the same size or standing still, you're actually losing. It doesn't feel that way at the time. And then suddenly it's all kinds of trouble.
What does Cat Williams say? He says, if you're still selling weed after 10 years and you haven't bumped up to Coke, I don't want to hang out with you.
Yeah. That's exactly the way to roll right there. Exactly.
I love it. So if people want to find out about you, I don't know where your screen went, but if people want to find out about you, they want to follow the journey. Yeah, it's back. They want to follow the journey. They want to see your hot takes on X or Twitter or whatever. But how would they do that?
At Reg Zeller. So RegZeller. I've tried to get into the LinkedIn thing and whatnot, but
can't do it.
Can't. It's
can't do
just God, my DMs on there are impossible. But anyway, we're building in public. We're doing a lot of stuff. Happy to share, happy to do as best we can to help out. But yeah, ultimately, anyone's doing manufacturing, we're here. That's our game.
I love it. Guys, if you got some value from this, send it around to a friend, and we'll see you next time.